What is up, YouTube? Today we are doing another user-requested sound, and I believe this is an Avalon sound. I kind of forgot because I recorded just the clip of that part and then ended up deleting it once I had the sound, but I believe it's an Avalon sound, so this is how to make that Avalon sound. And this is the sound I've got so far. I've managed to recreate, and we're going to go through the process of recreating it again with you guys. So yeah, this is it. Let's have a look. Cool, so let's add a brand new instance of Serum. So straight off the bat, the kind of like fundamental sort of technique that's creating this type of sound is a very transient modulation of the pitch, as far as I know. So how we do that is let's create an envelope, let's say envelope 2, and let's set the decay down to like 115 milliseconds and the sustain all the way down. And then what we can do is we can actually, tweak this, but we'll get to that just now. And we want to assign envelope 2 to the coarse control of the pitch here. So here, what we want to make sure is we want to change the type, because by default, Serum's modulation is always bipolar. So we want to set that to just one way. That way, the end pitch of the sort of modulation that's happening will be of the note that we're actually triggering. So you'll notice it's already like quite a sort of incredibly fat sound. It sort of adds punch to any synth, just by, adding a little bit of, very quick decay to the pitch of the sound. There's also quite a bit of distortion happening in the sound. But what I want to do is let's actually look at the MIDI pattern before we head too deep into the actual sound design of what's happening there. So I'm just going to copy it over and we can have a look here. So the idea is there's kind of like two parts happening. The first part repeats 3 times, and then there's a kind of resolve to that part with a slight sort of variation. So often, to get this kind of like sort of old school ravey type of, melody going, it's very much a sort of up, down, down, up, of either 2 or 3 different notes. It's not quite an arpeggiator, but it's a kind of simple sequence between a couple of notes that are in the scale of, the track that you're working in. So it's essentially, like I said, it's the 2 notes, but variations of where they're sort of being placed rhythmically in between each kick, if that makes sense. And then on the 4th run, there's a slight variation here. You can actually pause the video if you need. So let's duplicate this across and see what we've got so far. Okay, it's out of tune because I actually the track is in A sharp, so I'm just transposing it -2, and that should sound much better. Cool, so here, let's move over to the effects. Let's add some distortion. I cycled through all of them, and I think diode 2 was closest to what was going on in the sound. And here you can actually, you can pre-filter the actual sound of the distortion, before it feeds into the distortion itself. So this is pretty cool to kind of like fine-tune the actual tone of the sound, before getting it distorted. You can actually choose whether it's before or after using these controls here. So I like to use this to kind of tame down certain aspects of the distortion. Set it to something like this. Let's see how this sounds. Cool, so here I added some compression. I set it to multiband just to kind of boost the sort of pluckiness of the sound. And I mixed it down a little bit and added some filter here after this whole chain of effects and stuff, I set this to a high 24 with a bit of drive, something like that. So here, if you want to kind of fatten the sound up a little bit, give it a little bit more wideness, you can also set some unison onto the actual saw wave itself. So what I did is I just set it to 6 and then turned the detune down a little bit. And I actually played with some filter here as well. I added this to kind of further like filter off the sound before sending it through to the actual distortion itself. So it also just gives you kind of more controls to tweak while the sound is playing. You've got like a pre-filter and a post-filter over here. So you can kind of create these varying different sweeps and stuff like that. So obviously the pre-filter, before the distortion, it's a lot more kind of something that you would probably find in like a nighttime kind of lead like this, rather than a kind of more full-on stuff like Avalon's kind of style. So, heading back to the kind of more Avalon stuff, I'm pretty sure there was some post-filter modulation happening. And also, actually, what I did is I created another envelope 3, and set it to modulate this filter over here. But here, I set it to modulate backwards. So it kind of like opens upwards as this shape plays through, if that makes sense. So you can tweak this to taste. If you want a more sort of like acid style lead, then do that to the pre-filter. But yeah, let's see how this sounds. And I find usually with this kind of thing, the main thing to look out for is getting the mix of these effects just right. The sound itself is pretty kind of vanilla, it's just a saw wave or whatever. But getting the actual sort of effects right to get that kind of like more percussive synth sound, that like distorted kind of like, that sound I'm trying to go for here. Anyway. So again, like here, I like to leave out the delays, reverbs, and stuff like that. I'll put those onto the actual channel itself, because here I actually like to put on another filter. Reason being because the nature of those kind of really fast envelopes on those filters and stuff are creating the actual sound itself. So I don't want to alter the actual patch over time, if that makes sense. I kind of just want the sound to remain as is, and then just put a filter on top of that, which I can use to bring in or bring out. So here, what I did is I put on just the built-in filter from Cubase, the dual filter, and I put on color copy and reverence, which is a reverb. Color copy is the delay that I love so much, and then wider, this obviously a widener plugin. The settings aren't really too important. You can kind of tweak to your taste. They just kind of like add to the kind of like overall spaciness of the sound, if that makes sense. But it's the filter here. So this is kind of like the main, that creates the movement in this patch that we've created here. So for example, like here in this kind of like intro section, we want to sweep the filter kind of like upwards and then downwards, and then closer to like this break section, do like the same thing. Awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. A big thanks to IDM Mag, proud supporters of the dance music scene and my channel. As always, this preset is going onto my Patreon for my $5 supporters. If you want to know what that's all about, check out the link that's going to be on the screen somewhere around about now. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. See you guys next time.